Yahoo and cockle-doodle-doo, it's ya boy, Reddit Rooster. How you doing, my peeps? It's time for some more ugly r/dating hell stories. Tinder guy makes me cry when we hook up. I wake up to the sight of his used condom on the floor covered in ants. I block him on everything, so he slides into my Venmo. Last summer, after I graduated college, I moved to a major city where I was looking to start a career. My college boyfriend and I had just broken up, and I was excited to explore the dating scene in a big city and meet new people. Plus, I was only working part-time while I looked for a career gig, so I had a lot of free time. I started talking to this guy, let's call him Jay, who seemed very nice. He's 29 and I'm 22. I do my vetting process of adding each other in social media, and he seems normal enough. He has a lot of female friends, which I consider a good sign, and we make plans to get drinks. We meet at a nice bar and he suggests we get cocktails, which are pretty expensive. I was planning on just getting a beer, but he insists. The date is going fine. He's coming on a little stronger than I'd like, but he's cute and seems nice enough, and is into me. We finish at the bar and end up paying separately. I never expect a guy to pay on a date, but I was a little peeved that he was so insistent I got an expensive cocktail, while knowing I was a recent grad without a lot of money, and would have been happy with a cheap beer. We make out a little and we decide to go back to his place. He lives in the super hipster communal living space on the exact opposite side of town as me. We hook up and even though I like things on the rough side, something about him just sets me off. He's pulling my hair too hard, and it hits me that I'm pretty drunk and don't really like him. I start crying and we stop, but I decide to stay because it's too late and I'm so far from home and don't know the city well. I wake up in the morning in his bed and see that on the floor is his used condom from the night before. Ew. But it's covered in ants! So, avoiding his juicy ant condom, I get dressed, wake him up, and ask where the closest train station is. Apparently it's like a mile away and in a bad neighborhood, so he drives me there. He doesn't talk or look at me like the entire time, which honestly I'm not mad about. At this point I don't want to see him again, and assume he doesn't either. I was wrong. Jay starts texting me a ton, like 5 to 10 times in a row with no answer. He also Instagram messages me constantly, just replying to my stories, etc. I respond every like 10 messages or so with a one-word response at first, but eventually stop and just ignore him. One night he tells me he happens to be in my neighborhood and maybe we can meet. I got a bad gut feeling and blocked him on Instagram and texting. A couple days later I see that Jay's found my Snapchat and added me. I immediately block him, when all of a sudden I get a Venmo from him for $27, with a message attached about how he went to go respond to my Snap friend request, but hit his head on a tree branch and isn't sure what happened. I honestly burst out laughing. It was so absurd. I immediately Venmoed him the money back and just said, I prefer to never hear from you again. Do not contact me. Luckily I never heard from him. But Venmo? Boy, I hope you figured out a better approach to dating and start throwing your condoms in the trash. Wow, having ants is terrifying enough, but having ants on a juice-soaked condom? That is the most disgusting thing I've heard in a while. Just like in the last story, OP hooked up with someone that lives way too far away to hook up with on a first date. Gals and guys, my little peeps, never ever do that. It's a recipe for disaster. I threw up in the parking lot. This is the story of why I think a higher power does not want me to have nice things. So my now ex-boyfriend planned to take me to a nice restaurant because we had a very long distance relationship and I was visiting him. I felt normal all day and I don't have any food allergies or intolerances, so I didn't suspect anything would go wrong. Somehow it did. I felt fine till I walked into the place. I don't know what it was about being in that restaurant that immediately made me feel uneasy. I felt worse once I sat down at a table. I hoped it would just go away, seeing as I was feeling just fine before. It didn't. I excused myself to go to the bathroom. It didn't help. My stomach felt worse and worse. I got back to the table, probably looking pale as a sheet. I sat down again, and I realized that the feeling in my stomach was rising through my chest. I was gonna puke. I tell my boyfriend we needed to leave, and we got up and walked out before ordering any food. Once we were out of the restaurant, I just threw up in front of me. I didn't get any on myself, but I just kept going until I felt like I wouldn't vomit again. To this day, I have no idea why I threw up. I wasn't pregnant, I wasn't sick, I don't get motion sickness, I don't throw up due to nerves or stress, and I rarely if ever throw up at all. My boyfriend ended up breaking up with me a month later. So sad. The boyfriend seems like a really bad guy in this story, but maybe we don't know the whole picture. There could be a whole nother side to the story. But I definitely know why she threw up. It's because she heard about that awful ANT-CONDOM story. I also threw up 2 times while recording the 0 to 100 in 10 days. I'm going to try and make this as short as possible. There's way more detail, but it's long enough. So last year I went on a few dates with a nice, funny and attractive guy, but things changed pretty quickly. This guy was really keen after our first date, instantly said he wanted to see me again, and so we met up a couple of times after. A week into this and we had met up maybe 3 or 4 times, but he was expecting to see me every couple of days. I told him it was all getting a bit intense and maybe we should cool it a bit. One night I was really tired from work and he asked if I wanted to go to his, so I told him I was exhausted and just wanted to go home and sleep. He didn't like that and suggested he come to mine instead. He was pretty persistent, but I declined again and said I'd see him later in the week. Fast forward 2 hours and he texts me saying he'd left something outside of my door. Now, picture this. I live in a small, quiet apartment building. There isn't a lot of activity, but to get in, he would have had to wait outside until someone was going in or out. Also bear in mind that he lived a good 30 minutes drive away from me. So I get this text and instantly freeze. I'm thinking he's waiting in the hallway or something. So I creep to the peephole in my door and can't see anything except a brown paper bag. I open the door and the bag has a message written on it, saying these things are to help me relax. Inside the bag was a teddy, some bath stuff, and a chocolate bar. Having not replied to the first text, I get another one asking if I've seen the gift. I tell him yeah, and he says he's waiting outside, and can he come in. Even though I'm utterly freaked out by him sneaking into my building, he still came all this way and tried to do something nice, so I say yes. We discussed the gifts, how I found this quite intense too, after already telling him he was quite full on a few times, and that he didn't need to do these things because it made me a little uncomfortable. Maybe 5 minutes later, this guy was talking about us going away together and making plans when we'd known each other 1 week. That was it. I needed to break it off with him. I met up with him once more. This was going to be it. But I couldn't do it. I'm a bit of an introvert, and I was really unsure of how he'd react, so I sent him a message later that night, explaining my feelings and how I think he'd be better suited for someone more overtly affectionate than me. He read the message instantly, but didn't reply, so I thought, okay, maybe he needs to process it. 2 hours later, he sends me a really abusive essay of a message, saying that I had issues and that he deserves better than a text. Maybe true, but it'd only been about 12 days by this point. I replied saying that he was probably right, but I felt I had to be honest. About 3 a.m. he texts me, saying he's sorry and taking back everything he said earlier and asking if I want to go for coffee. I politely declined. It's almost a year later now, and I still hear from this guy every few weeks. So if anyone has any tips on deterring mild stalking, hit me up. This story is kinda sad, because it seems like the date wasn't such a bad guy. Just a very lonely person who did not understand boundaries. Of course he acted very immaturely, and it's good that they broke it off. But never do it over text, that's just a bad move. Especially because he didn't act like a real threat. A call could have been better in my opinion. What do you think, peeps? Please write your opinion in the comments. 2 hours later, he sent... Laters, you guys! This is the story of why I think... Why... I had only been to one other baseball game before in my life, so it excited me to go, and I was also doing mistakes. A lot of mistakes. One thing I did notice is that a bunch of beer cans were right by the passengers. Punkity-po. I played a few hands too. Then we went to the karaoke bar.